I'm going to do that too. So anyway, this all like really came about mostly because of the questions and the stuff that people were asking me. How do I close this? Does anybody see this square in front of me? What happened there? Okay. So the whole reason I started this program was because when I started meeting with people, I kind of played it by ear. I just wanted to see what people wanted to talk about. And I realized really quickly that it starts out, simple day to day, and then it becomes like a bigger thing. People want to talk about life and big things. And I actually like that better. But I wanted to develop some kind of system. And I started looking and sort of like trolling around all the different ADHD groups that I'm in and my own group too. And I noticed that I really wasn't crazy, that people were asking kind of big questions like, what do I do? How do I keep my friends? How do I save my marriage? How do I not feel like crap every day? And so it just came from all those things like sort of together, and my desire to create some kind of program of my own. And I put in here, just for fun, one of my favorite quotes. I have a lot of quotes from The Alchemist, but this is like my favorite. And it's, if you can concentrate always on the present, you'll be a happy man. Life is the moment we are living right now. Because I think we get really caught up in the emotional stuff, and we don't even see that like the moment is fine. It's fine. It's just a matter of knowing when it's happening, catching ourselves like right in the middle. Okay, I don't even know how to, something just beeped at me and I don't know what it was. Sorry. Okay, so that is my favorite quote from The Alchemist, and I do feel like staying present is relevant, because if you're present, you can pause before reacting. And that's sort of a problem for a lot of us, and we have these big emotional reactions to things. Sometimes it's justified and sometimes maybe not. All right, the way I structured this is basically, it's pretty simple. It would take about 6 weeks, assuming people wanted to meet once a week. Oh, apparently the tow truck is back in my house. Please ignore that. I structured it as 6 weeks because I really didn't feel like I could do it faster. And I had come up with 5 like big areas that I tended to get the most questions about from people. So the first session I would probably deal with talking about ADHD, because that is an email. Yeah, that is an email that I get at least 3 times a week. Like, how do I explain this to people? I have a new job. How do I talk about ADHD with my employer, and how do I explain what it is and what it means for me personally? So the whole first section is about that. And it's also a little bit educational. That's one thing about this whole program, is it's like partially a course, but it's more of a course where you work with me instead of just logging in and doing it in a self-paced way. You do it with me. So that would be the first session, where we learn a little bit about ADHD and we learn about explaining ADHD and talking about ADHD. The second session, which is, I think it's kind of hard. So I kind of wanted to do it at the beginning. It's about depression and the role that depression and ADHD, like how they bounce off of each other, and how some of that kind of, each of those diagnoses can make the other one worse. I give you some facts about depression, talk a little bit about core beliefs that some of us have about ourselves. A lot of us have core beliefs. Some of them are positive and realistic, and some of them are not very positive and not realistic. And we carry these things throughout our lives. So we talk a lot about that kind of stuff. And we actually spend some time focusing on picking out one core belief that we want to really explore, really talk about and work through. And it's hard because I share a lot about myself. I find that people want me to share too. So I do a lot of that, and I tell you my stories at the same time. The third session, the third hour, would probably be shame. That's the order I've been doing it in. Shame is number 3. Shame is sort of a universal human thing. There's no way around it, but there is shame about life, and then there's shame about living with ADHD. And that's they're kind of two different things. And we talk about shame and the different types of shame and basically how to work through it, because it's not going to go away, but you need to find some workarounds for yourself. Anxiety is number 4. That is this is a huge one. I have yet to finish anxiety in 1 hour. Usually we talk for like an hour and a half. I don't think I've gone beyond an hour and a half, but we usually talk for an hour and a half. Some facts about anxiety and ADHD. If you have ADHD, you probably have some measure of anxiety. I feel like it's pretty inescapable. We talk a little bit about medications and anxiety, but the really cool part about anxiety is some of the ways it manifests itself and seeing some of that in ourselves and discussing it. And then I think it's really fun, and I've gotten really good feedback on it. I have a whole section in here about reframing some of your thought patterns and trying to figure out what those repetitive sort of negative self-talk things are that are percolating in there. I've been told it's really fun. The 5th session is about relationships, because relationships are a big deal with ADHDers. We have a hard time sometimes expressing our needs. And I have some theories about our wacky attachment style when it comes to relationships. And in the relationship section, we also talk a lot about boundary setting and what it takes to set a boundary, and what it takes to maintain a boundary, and healthy boundaries, what it looks like, and what is probably not the most healthy. For the 6th session, I decided I wanted to come up with something that everyone could keep. So I have what's called an EAP, or emotional action plan, sort of a workbook, and we do it together. We talk about things that you need to do to keep yourself healthy. We talk about it, the day-to-day, the week-to-week, the month-to-month. We talk about what our plan is for when you are kind of triggered and going down a rabbit hole. Or maybe we would develop, I know we would develop a list of safe people to talk to. And knowing you have that in your back pocket, I think, is really helpful. At least it has been for me, and it has been for the people that I've shared it with. I have on here number 7 as a bonus session, because when we're going through like the first 6 sessions, a lot of people, like, some stuff comes up that they want to talk about. And maybe we don't have time to address it. So I'm just telling everyone that I'll give people like a 7th session included in the whole package, because it just seems like the fair thing to do. So I'll break down here each of the sections a little bit, talking about ADHD. So this is like the basic layout. And I pretty much go in this order most of the time. Oh, and I should add, there is a workbook aspect to this. I would probably send you the workbook ahead of time, and you can do parts of it on your own if you would prefer to do it with me. Some people prefer to do it with me at the same time, and I can print out one for myself and we go through it together. But the first thing we'll do is talk about ADHD and brain structure. Very simple. I'll share a little bit of information about the structure of our brains, neurotransmitters. I will talk about executive function. I know I've been beating this to death, but I feel like if we understand where emotion falls into the whole executive function map, I use a lot of Thomas Brown stuff here. I think if we understand where it's coming from, we have a lot better chance of dealing with it in a healthy way. I do have a section. Oh, let me let somebody in here. Who is this? Rachel. Oh, it's Rachel. Hello, Rachel. Let me close this again. Wow, I am not good at this, am I? Okay. What was I talking about? Oh, at the very end of this first, like, talking about ADHD section, we'll formulate a way for you to explain ADHD and what it means for you. And then we also talk a little bit about some of the misconceptions, what it is and what it is not, because there seems to be a lot of confusion out there. And I've noticed that even within our own families, I've had people tell me that their families don't understand, they need an explanation. So we're going to talk about all of that during the first session. The second session, the depression one, which is, like I said, for me, the most difficult one, or the most time-consuming one. I'll start off with some basic information about the correlation between. Go and get a new battery. Okay. This guy got started. Okay. Apparently my car is working now. but we need a new battery. Okay, I will start off talking about the correlation between ADHD and depression. And believe me, it is a high correlation. Most of us will be dealing with depression at some point, whether that is a low-lying sort of undercurrent that's sort of just part of our lives, or if we go through periods of time where events trigger us and we go a little bit further down. I'll talk about some of that stuff. I go really big into core beliefs, and I reveal some of my own core beliefs and some of the stuff I've done, like strategies I've used, some of which I stole from my therapists over the years, or I stole from a book. And I can make reading recommendations too. I have a couple books, but one in particular that's very good to work through this kind of stuff. We will talk about working through those core beliefs. And I really think it's fun, and I've been told that it is fun and it is helpful to talk back to some of those core beliefs. And if you need to, even make up a new one. Like, it could be anything. But I've been doing this with people, and I'm told that it is very helpful and very effective. And it makes you feel a little bit more empowered or in control about some of this stuff that is so out of our control. Let's see, shame. Okay, I start this with sort of a fun little visualization, and there goes my husband again. Garage door. Okay. I start this out with a fun visualization. Basically, this visualization is specific to ADHD, and it's just about trying to figure out what really you're the most ashamed of, and the people that you have the most trouble communicating with, the people that you have the most trouble speaking and conveying your needs to, whether that's about ADHD or other things. But it's a kind of an interesting way to look at shame and what you are most ashamed of and what you are most afraid of. One of the things that I spend a lot of time on here is separating yourself from ADHD. Like, you are not ADHD. You are Rachel, you are Patty, you are you have ADHD. And instead of looking at it as your whole identity, it is just one piece of you and who you are. I also spend quite a bit of time talking about worthiness, because it is my belief that so many of us suffer with this feeling of being unworthy of love or taking up space even in the world. And we don't realize it until we say it out loud. Like, I don't deserve to be heard. I don't deserve to be respected. I don't. And that's hard. And I think you have to make a choice about being worthy, and you have to practice it like every day. So I spend a lot of time talking about ways that you can practice worthiness and proving to yourself that you are worthy, and also creating boundaries around your own thinking. Because one of the things about worthiness is it's about, you give that to yourself. You have to have some boundaries with yourself. You have to start to notice when these core beliefs that we already talked about are coming out, and when you're sort of living in shame instead of working through it. It's complicated, but I'm told it's very effective. We'll see. All right, anxiety. This is a long session. In fact, like I said, I don't think that I've completed anxiety in less than 90 minutes. First thing is the facts, just basic facts. It's kind of interesting how many Americans, like 19% of the US population, is living with some kind of diagnosable anxiety disorder, and very few people are being adequately treated for their anxiety. I spent a little bit of time talking about hypersensitivity, because a lot of ADHDers talk about this stuff. Sort of, some of it is sensory. In loud spaces, we don't like noise. Sometimes we don't like crowds. Some of us don't even like tags on our clothing. I spent a little time on hypersensitivity, because that tends to go together. Not always, but it tends to go together a lot with anxiety. So we'll talk about that. Talk about rumination, what it looks like, ways to deal with rumination, where it even comes from. Talk about all of that. I talk about perfectionism, because I've been saying for like 3 years now, perfectionism is like, what's the expression? The thief of joy. I think that's the expression. Perfectionism is the thief of joy. Or wait, comparison. Ha! No, it's not perfectionism, it's comparison. But perfectionism will also steal your joy, and it's also unattainable. It's like anything that you are holding out there as like perfection that you expect from yourself is probably unattainable. So you're setting yourself up for failure. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about fear of rejection, rejection sensitive dysphoria. I wrote an article on this. We're going to talk about all of these things. And, you know, when you grew up with ADHD, you probably did experience some level of rejection, and probably more than maybe other kids around you, or maybe more than your siblings. So we're going to talk about fear of rejection. We're going to talk about avoidance behaviors, and avoidance looks like a lot of different things at different times. But we'll talk about that. And the best part of anxiety is reframing your thought patterns. We're going to pick a thought pattern, like a script, and we're going to spend time on it. I give you a couple tools for like rewriting the script, and then we're going to do silly things like decide how many times a day you're going to catch yourself and repeat the new script. It's really crazy, but I'm telling you, you can train your brain, and it does work. So weird, but it does work. It really does work. And I'm told it's also really fun. I've had a good time doing it, and I've had a good time doing it and sharing it with other people. So the last section is healthy relationships. I decided at the last minute to include this because I was getting so many emails about relationships, whether that be, you know, marital relationships, romantic relationships, friendships, even work relationships and colleagues and that sort of thing. So I started looking into it, and I developed a bit of a theory about our attachment styles. Without going into too much detail, I think some of us have wacky attachment styles. I don't know if it's a result. It's probably a combination of things. It's a result of our brain wiring and brain chemistry, and it's probably a result of childhood experiences and some of those core beliefs and the kind of environment we grew up in. I know I have weird attachment styles. I actually developed a whole quiz for this, which is available on the website. But for fun, maybe we'll take the attachment styles quiz together when we meet for the last session. We talk about romantic relationships. Oh, let me let somebody in. Oh, it's Christine. We talk about romantic relationships. I have written several times now, 2 or 3 times, about how my relationship works, how my marriage works. And I don't write that because I'm an expert. I just write it because I've somehow been able to strike a balance between being really honest and being able to ask for what I need. And yeah, it's like brutal honesty, like just having to tell your partner, you know, this is what I need. And that seems to be an issue for a lot of us. Oh, roadblocks, common relationship roadblocks. I actually used Gina Para's book, a couple other sources, and I made a whole list of some of the common issues that ADHDers find in their relationships. And it was pretty enlightening to see some of it in myself and to think about the emails that I've gotten. So we're going to go through common roadblocks in our relationships. We're going to talk about ways to like heal a relationship if you're having issues with it. We're going to talk about friendships and family relationships, because even though, you know, a lot of us have like a primary partner, our friendships are really important. And I think having like a social outlet and then losing touch with the people close to you that understand you, I think that is probably just as damaging as like losing a boyfriend or breaking up with your boyfriend or something. So we'll talk about that. Family is complicated. Family is super complicated. I don't know why a pink line just appeared here. I don't know. Okay, family relations, and then boundary setting. I started to include this because of conversations that happened inside Coaching Corner. I did a little research on setting boundaries and ways to do that in a kind way. You know, we talked about reading a book by Brene Brown, and we have several to choose from. But one of the things Brene Brown talks about is how boundaries are actually what makes a relationship work. So boundaried people are the kindest people. And it's kind of a practice, I think. I think you have to practice setting boundaries, and just learning the word no is like the first thing. No, just learning how to say no to people and setting a boundary. It's a huge deal. So we cover all this stuff in that 5th session. the sixth session we do together. We take the EAP workbook that I created and we fill it out together, and we make decisions about going forward. What am I going to need to do to keep myself balanced? Am I going to have to check in twice a day? Am I going to have to, like, once a month, sit and sort of brain dump and try to figure out if I'm taking care of myself, if my needs are being met in my relationships, if I am taking good physical care of myself, am I taking my meds? We're going to go through and we're going to have a plan for what to do when things start to go bad, or when there's like an event in your life and things start to spiral. And we do that part together. I think, is this it? Is this all I have? I think this is all I have. I want to short because we talked for like 10 minutes. I think I did good. Hold on. Let me stop my